There are new runes, and you want to know, will warriors suck in Phase 3? Let's find out. Open an incognito window. Then we're going to be going to the warrior sim made by Guybrush, and we're going to be starting in incognito so that way you don't have to worry about me having different settings than yourselves. Click the settings button once, and now you're at the page where we can start tweaking some things. Let's make this a little interesting. I want to set the boss's armor so high that no matter what you did debuff wise, it would still be armor capped. Also, this means that you don't have to worry about Blizzard trying to hose us. Let's have just one assumption that helps us, and that's that there's not going to be any bleed damage reduction on these mobs. I could be wrong, but I think that's not too crazy. They're not going to be mechanical after all. Let's set our level to 50, and we're going to set the mob level to 52. If it was 53, it would hurt our rage generation a little because it would make weapon skill matter more, but Agron said that they're going to give everybody weapon skill, so that probably doesn't matter. Now, there's probably another setting thing that you're wondering about, and that is, are you better off with totems on Horde, or are you better off being Alliance with the blessings? I tried both of them before this video. It's really similar. Don't stress about it. I'm going to turn on a whole bunch of the consumes, but you don't need to do that if you don't think you want to bother with it in the raid, because what this video is going to actually be about is how to decide for yourself what your performance would look like if you played a certain way. But to make it a little more interesting, I am going to turn on a bunch of these things, and now we're going to select some runes. I'm thinking we test out a Gladiator stance build because that shit sounds hilarious. And Devastate does work in Gladiator stance, or at least that's what Agron told us, and I don't think he would lie. That would make him look pretty stupid. Now remember, why would we think that something like this makes sense? It's because percent damage increases, like on Shield Mastery. This, but only on the crit, but that crit does help you get up the actual deep wounds, and you can't see it on here, but Gladiator stance, it also gives you some damage enhancement. That's going to double dip on this deep wounds talent. So I think actually just about any build that utilizes this deep wounds talent is going to do pretty similarly to any other build that uses it, which you'll see in a moment when I can show you that we have over 50% of our damage coming from deep wounds. Another thing I like to do when we make videos like this is have it be really idiot proof, because it's easier for you to suspend your disbelief and believe that you can hit Sunder every global, I think, than, you could play perfectly and have an awesome comp like some other group. So we're going to go into here, we're going to set all of these CDs such that you pop them right at the start of the fight, like an absolute moron, and part of the reason is because it doesn't actually affect the damage calculations too much here, but we want to make sure that Flagellation lines up with all the other CDs so we can stack all these percentages together. Now let's run the DPS and we're going to get a low value. Why are we getting a low value? Let's click settings. This opens up the panel where you select your gear. Remember, Devastate requires your offhand to be a shield. Right now it's not set to 1, so let's go put a shield on and sim that again. Awesome, so we're doing way more damage already, but we only have level 40 gear on. Okay, so let's figure out how to come up with a gear set that's reasonable. Now remember my theory before. All the deep wounds builds are going to be relatively similar damage-wise. I bet that the way the stat priority works is going to be fairly similar too. Let's pick out what gear to use. The way you do this is you can click on one of the pieces, so in this case the main hand slot, and then you hit sheet DPS. This is then going to calculate the damage averages by doing a bunch of sims on all these pieces, and it's going to rank them from most damage to least damage. It's ran locally on your computer, so if you have a decent computer, it'll be really fast. I have an awesome i9 processor, but I also have it underclocked and set to like 65 watts max. So even if you have a laptop, it'll calculate just about as fast as me. Let's go and quickly set up all these other pieces by running sheet DPS. Remember, you could do this with any runes. You could do this with any rotation and whatever you believe to be reasonable expectations for the boss balancing in the next phase. So that means you don't have to take my word for anything. I'm trying to show you a method of making your own decisions, because if you go and look at a whole bunch of videos on YouTube and try to memorize what people are saying, it's not going to help you too much, especially if you don't want to take notes like it's a college class, and you probably don't want to do that. But if what you did was that you just stopped the video after you feel comfortable looking at all the techniques that we're going over, and you did this for yourself, you'd make up your own opinions on how to play the game, and they would actually be cemented in your mind. Plus, you could entertain yourself for a few hours, I bet, trying to get better values than me, because these values that I'm getting aren't the best ones I've been able to get even. I want this video to be about how you could come up with shit for yourself, so trying to show you the best thing I found, I think that would just be discouraging, and you'll quite easily beat what I have set up here. a lot of other people have already. And also remember, we set the boss armor to 30,000, which is well over the armor cap. But remember, there is an armor cap. It means that the difference between 20,000 armor and 30,000 armor is 0. So it's not like the boss is taking 95% less damage. The boss is taking 75% less damage. So that's why we picked those huge, ridiculous ass numbers. Now we're going to quickly get in these last few pieces of gear, and then we can start tweaking the rotation, and we'll be able to start thinking things like, how would I optimize a build? What kind of proc uptimes should I be looking for? Is consumed by rage not up enough? Is there a way I could get it up more? Or perhaps should I drop consumed by rage? Especially if you're considering using two-handed weapons, that's going to be something that you should come up with for yourself, in my opinion. It'll be way more fun than reading other people's stuff, and if you go and use this sim, hey, nobody has better tools than this. Guybrush is the fucking man. So there's no reason that you couldn't get really similar results to literally the best players in the world when it comes to decision making on how to build your character. It just requires a time investment. So if it's fun for you and you can see that you're getting a better and better sim value, you're probably going to enjoy it and keep getting closer and closer to finding what is truly optimal. Or perhaps finding what's truly reasonable given the people you play with and the level of preparation that you want to take into raid. Myself personally, I would always want to get basically everything outside of raid, except the Blasted Lands buffs. If I'm playing with a bunch of other people who are really passionate about parsing, I'm going to get the Blasted Lands buffs because I don't want to hurt their performance at all. But if I just wanted to go to a really well-ran hug, I probably wouldn't bother because it's honestly a huge pain in the ass to get those for the little bit of increase you get in damage. But that's up to you. And it's nice that it can be up to you and you can actually see how it's going to impact your performance in raid. Now let's see, we've gone from 270 DPS, mostly because you didn't have a shield on before, to about 550 by putting a shield on. Now we're at 850. And the boss still has hilariously hard armor. Let's see what our stats panel is looking like. This is going to show us things like how much uptime you have on different abilities. Why do you only have 60% on Consumed by Rage? Think about it. It procs when you go from under 80 rage to over 80 rage. I know the tooltip says like 79 to 80. It's wrong. It's a pain in the ass. Let's see. If it was that we're spending too much rage, we'd think that capping this, where it only casts it when we're over 80, would increase the uptime and increase our DPS. So, okay, DPS went down. Did our CBR uptime go down? Actually, it looks like our CBR uptime is fine. Interesting. Maybe we could get away with spending more rage, and there's not going to be a huge impact on how much DPS we have. Let's see what happens if we throw in a billion heroic strikes. I bet this is going to be bad. Okay, cool. This is probably going to tank our CBR uptime. Let's see. Yeah, it hurt a bit. What happens if now we try to make it so we only use heroic strike when we're at the break point for basically being able to trip over the CBR proc? Okay, awesome. So we went from 880 by blindly spamming Sunder to now 920 by using a little bit of thought on how we're actually going to make use of heroic strike. And the way that we were making the decision there was looking at the uptime on Consumed by Rage. Now, let's say maybe something that you're considering is I want to use a two-handed weapon. This is the kind of stuff you'd want to check out. You'd want to go pick a certain rotation and see how it impacts your uptime on Consumed by Rage. Maybe you see that it's getting absolutely hammered, and so you decide, okay, that means I have to play this a little differently. How am I going to tweak the values I have for the breakpoints on activating moves? Or perhaps you could go into here and see, ooh, it looks like I actually wasn't using Diamond Flask on pull, and it's a 60-second fight. What happens if I run this? Oh, actually, I get the same value because it's 60 seconds from the end of the fight, so only on the simulations where you're at the 70-second mark would the proc even be any different. And these are the kind of things that you'll just have to see for yourself and mess around in the sim. And what you're going to find is, I think there's going to be a lot more freedom with the way you play, partially because the itemization's a little bit better as far as like the two-handed weapons and shit. And you also have a lot more talent points, which is really nice because it's easier to get this Deep Wounds talent using a variety of builds. And Deep Wounds goes through armor really well. Like, let's check how much of our damage is Deep Wounds in this build. That shit's fucking hilarious, right? Now, I don't think they're probably going to end up nerfing this, and I bet you're going to pretty easily be able to do over 900 DPS. So the real question is going to be how good the other classes do. but they might have actually made it so you can do a sword and board DPS spec, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know who was asking for that. Some of you guys probably were, but maybe they actually found a way to pull it off and not break the game, or maybe Warriors will be super broken. Who knows, either way, but good luck in Raid. Use the tools shown in here to come up with your own ideas on how to play, instead of just going and trying to copy people. You'll have a lot more fun, and quite likely, if you try to copy the best people, they'll have weird little nuances that you won't be able to actually replicate in your raids. Like perhaps they'll put more focus on doing cleave damage because they'll reserve a mob just for the highest DPSing warrior to cleave. If other people went and multi-dotted them or cleaved also, it could reduce their damage. Or perhaps they would actually delay killing the boss because it would in some way enhance a warrior's DPS, even though that would in general hurt everybody else's DPS. You just never know. But if you go and use tools like this, you actually will be able to know, and it's just way more fun in my opinion. Once you get your character and your gameplay perfected, you need to worry about your teammates. So I suggest that you try to figure out how to encourage them and get them to also learn how to sim and look at logs, because that's the only way that you'll really be able to get as far as possible given your gear and abilities. You can click these videos if they seem interesting to you. YouTube thinks you might like them, but who knows?